those who stand the greatest chance of surviving the horrors that may come their way are those who can adapt or change to the shape, adapt, shape shift to what their circumstances require. Whether the circumstances are short, a week, a month, or whether the circumstances require that we adapt for a few years, that changing shape is in fact our lifeline. Hi everybody, it's time for another archetypal video. It's so much fun to figure out like which archetype am I going to do next, and so today I decided to do the Shapeshifter, which is and you know, I have to tell you, the more I research these archetypes, the more fascinating they become. And just as a bit, I mean, the Shapeshifter is one of the oldest archetypes ever in the whole spectrum, in the whole family of archetypes, and probably one that has intrigued myth so much, because from the Shapeshifter we get, you know, the werewolf, we get vampires, we get all the creatures of nature that change their forms, all the gods and goddesses that change their forms, and how many stories about the gods that come down and they look like this and they look like that. And even the Egyptian god Set could take on the form of an ox, or he could be a bull, or he could be a crocodile, or the many different forms that higher power can shift in and blend into the human experience. Now, from an archetypal point of view, I mean, this just fascinated me. What is that about? I mean, what is this fascination that people have always had? We still have. That's my doggie back there. She just had surgery, so she's just mending herself. Anyway, with the changing of forms. Well, and why are the forms so oftentimes so ominous or so threatening, or creatures of the night like vampires that change forms, and they're a bat one time and then they're a creature that, you know, assaults your neck, and the frog to prince, these creatures that have been punished, human beings who've been punished by having their form taken away from them, and they're reduced to being reptiles or other kinds of creatures. It's so fascinating to me, but let's think about that. What people fear the most is change. Sudden change that comes out of nowhere. To have the shape of your life suddenly change right from under you. To have a shape that you count on, the shape of your life, the shape of your body, the shape of your home. To have this shape suddenly, like in Turkey and in Syria, to have an earthquake shape shift your reality in the blink of an eye. That is for most human beings. And I will admit I'm one of them. One of the most terrifying of experiences we could possibly have. To have the world as we know it suddenly shift. And we find ourselves in a whole new shape of our own world. Rubble. Our apartment gone, our home gone, our family gone. The entire shape of our world gone. It positions power as in the way that says we have no power over the whims of nature. And so it is not surprising that the cast of characters that mythologically and in legend and in stories that come down to us as shapeshifters, the capacity to instantly change the shape you're looking at or change something familiar to something else is so terrifying. And they take on an ominous, terrifying form because the idea that something could change the shape of your life that fast is in fact horrifying, because it does actually happen. Earthquakes and tsunamis and fires and accidents suddenly change. It is an experience of a shape-shifting event. So the shapeshifter is not just like a person or a mythic creature like a werewolf, or it's also the fact that events happen that change the shape of the whole of our life. And they're unforeseen. They just happen. Nobody expected that earthquake. It just happened. And now more than, as of this recording, over 20,000 people are gone. And who knows how many more and how long it will take to reorganize and rebuild the lives of all of these people in Turkey and in Syria. And who knows? Who knows? But the shapeshifter is a force, an archetype, a pattern that goes from one shape to another. But remember when I said a couple of videos ago that archetypes are not negative. So this sounds like I'm giving it a whole big negative, presentation, but it's not. What is terrifying for us is the experience of having to change shapes like this, or having the shape of our life shift like that. At the same time, the capacity to shift your shape is one of the, how do I say this? It's, I beg your pardon. It's one of the assets of survival, to change your shape, to adapt to what's happening around you, to be able to accommodate. If this is happening, if I can't do this, then I have to do this in the moment to survive. The capacity to change your shape, to adapt to what is required of you in the moment. I think of a book that I read, several of them, on people who survived the Holocaust. And I was so impressed with this one book written by a Polish Jewish historian who unfortunately, tragically, did not survive the Holocaust, but his notes, his research did. And he, as the shape of Europe was changing rapidly, the shapeshifter most certainly rapidly, and the Jews were put into the ghetto in Warsaw. This gentleman, Rosenblum, I believe his name was, he was a historian, and his field of history was the history of the Jews in Europe. And when he became a historian, he went into that particular area because he noted that most of the history of Europe had been written by Christians. And so they excluded the history of the Jews. So prior to World War II, prior to the Nazis invading Poland in the September of 1939, he had set up his research, and he had become known for it in Warsaw. And he was acquiring the genealogy of Jewish families as they came to Warsaw and the surrounding towns. And when the ghetto started and the Nazis came in the ghetto, he and a small group of very trusted allies packaged all of his research and brought it into the ghetto, where it was found after the war. But during that time in the ghetto, he became obsessed with acquiring as much history as he could, as he realized that in fact people were not safe in the ghetto, that they were all going to be exterminated, that that was the plan. And he wrote about this, and he wrote his observations. And one of the observations that I thought was so astonishing was he said when people would come in, and the Jews were coming in from all parts of Poland thinking they would be safe in Warsaw, because they thought of it as the New Jerusalem, and that this insanity that was going on in all these other places surely could not happen in a sophisticated city. So they got there, and he would say, tell me what it was like for you where you were from. And he noted that if he did not get the trauma and their history down within a period of a few days, that the capacity to survive would automatically kick in, and they would rewrite their own history in order to survive the place where they were now living. They would somehow, in order to survive, they had to adapt. In order to adapt, they had to minimize the horror. And they had to say, well, that other place wasn't so bad, and if that wasn't so bad, this we could make. I mean, they had to minimize the horror. They had to change the shape of the nightmare they were living. And he said that if people, those who stand the greatest chance of surviving the horrors that may come their way, are those who can adapt or change to the shape, adapt, shape shift to what their circumstances require. Whether the circumstances are short, a week, a month, or whether the circumstances require that we adapt for a few years. That changing shape is in fact our lifeline. I will never forget that. And it truly made a deep and profound impression on me. And if you think about it, all life is the constant changing of shapes and forms. That's all that happens every day. It is a 24/7 operation. Nothing changes the same. Nothing stays the same. Everything is constantly shape-shifting in front of us. It's the speed at which it happens, the drama at which it happens, and what exactly changes shape that terrifies us. We can see, for example, leaves falling from trees in the autumn, and we expect that, and so we think as the tree in front of us reshapes itself, we expect that, and we're not threatened by it. But if we turn around and watch the roof cave in on our house, and it changes shape, that terrifies us. So you can understand how we have become accustomed to trusting that certain forms will never change, that this house will never change, this will never change, because we're terrified of anything changing its shape, especially rapidly. And yet, the whole journey of life is about shape shifting, and shapes shifting what they are from this to that, from seeds to plants, from plants back to the earth, it's constant like that. Now, when that shapeshifter takes its position within a person, because we expect people to be somewhat consistent, the shapeshifter is a very interesting archetype for a person to have. I think about actors, for example, that you see them in one series, or you see them in one movie, and you see them in another, and you can't even recognize, is that really that person? That's a shapeshifter. They have a quality in them that allows them to just adapt to a part so completely. I think of Tom Hanks, how he looked in Philadelphia, how he looked in this, he looked in that part, how he all the weight he lost for, what was that movie? he's talking to a ball named Wilson. Oh, come on, somebody talk to me. What was the name of that? He's a FedEx guy. You know what I'm talking about. But again, he changed his shape. And he is known for that, his capacity to so thoroughly become the shape of the movie. Meryl Streep is another one who can just totally become whatever she needs to become for a part. There's no distance between her and what she's playing. She somehow absorbs the force of it. And that's why we love these actors, because they become the shape in front of our eyes. On the other hand, the shadow side of the shapeshifter is someone who absolutely boggles the imagination. George Santos comes to mind, who changes his shape and story with everyone he talks to. One day he's a Broadway producer. Another day, from volleyball, he has 2 knee replacements in a school that he never even went to. He changes his shape constantly, constantly. Everything that comes out of him is this illusion about what he would like to be, what he thinks you might want to see. It's like a spellcaster shapeshifter. He'll just change the shape. Yes, I was here. Yes, my mother was in 9/11. Oops, she died there. Then I was here. Oh, I lost people in that. I lost friends in the Pulse massacre. I just constant. And that kind of shape shifting is pathological. That's where you realize something, this person has no mooring inside. There's no anchor there. There's nothing. This person will do, and this archetypal pattern will just change with anything that's in front of him or her. And it's the shadow side of the shapeshifter. But the positive side, think about this. When you're watching TV and you watch these advertisements for like weight loss or exercise, what they're doing is they're appealing to you and saying, we can help you change your shape. We can shapeshift you. This product can shapeshift you. This exercise program, these bicycles that you get on by yourself can shapeshift you. They are selling shape-shifting products and convincing you that your shape can look like that shape if you just buy this pill, or you just sit on this bike and let this machine talk to you, and you can change your shape. And what is so extraordinary is, you think about it, and it's the fact that maybe at some level, and I'm winging it here, by the way, I'm just winging it here because it occurs to me that at some deep level, the idea of being bound by a shape is anathema to the soul, not to our personality so much, but to the soul, that we are in fact boundless. We are shapeless. Energy is shapeless. What shape does energy have? I mean, I'm surrounded by energy, I'm surrounded by oxygen, but it has no shape. It has no shape. If it were freezing in here, you'd see my breath and we'd see a little of that, but whoosh, the shape would go. So there's a part of us that has no shape. And our shape is but temporary. And we are always changing our shape. Every day. And you get up one morning and you look at yourself and say, when did I get that old? Or where did that come from? But it's just constant. It's just constant. It's absolutely constant. And I think, that the shapeshifter, when a person has that archetype, when it's really a primary archetype in a person, they're great storytellers. They change the shape of something. They become someone, a clown, for example. They become someone who can take comedians. They can reshape the world we're looking at and make us see something differently. There's a lot of positive that comes from being able to take something and say, look at it this way, look at it that way, let's change its shape. The shadow side is a George Santos or other people who are pathological liars and are completely trying to reshape your reality, trying to gaslight you, trying to say you really didn't see what you saw. That's when the shadow side of this archetype shows itself. And I have to say that people who specialize in fake news, for example, they're shapeshifters. They try to shape shift. They try to shape shift what's going on in the world around us. And even though there's more than one perspective, at some point, some things become absolute unmitigated lies. And it really comes up to each person to develop discernment, to be able to trust your own powers of perception in a world that is really spinning more rapidly than we can possibly imagine. So that's the shapeshifter. And by the way, before I sign off on this, there's so many movies that are about shapeshifters. All those movies about werewolves and vampires and zombies, and these are creatures, the people who, through circumstances of being bitten or infected or this or that, whoosh, their shape changes. But I find it fascinating that our airwaves are loaded with these stories now, loaded with them. Series on vampires, series on zombies, series on The Walking Dead. These are all shapeshifter series. And they're about some part of us in the collective is sensing that we are changing our shape somehow, that some fundamental part of us is very vulnerable, very vulnerable. These movies aren't just happening because they're, quote, popular. They're popular because we are sensing something that's off the rails within ourselves, something that's not right. The Walking Dead is something that for me has come out of the opioid crisis, the massive drug crisis that has knocked so many people's psyches out of commission. That there's so much happening in the world that people can't process. Lives changing so fast. The shape of lives changing far too fast for emotions to catch up with and process. And so anxiety goes skyrocketing. And all the support systems human beings were always used to are not intact. So that the shape of support has changed. And it leads to people to find artificial support through medication. And that's like The Walking Dead. So I don't have an immediate remedy for that. What I just have to say is that what we're looking at is a world that is moving so very fast. And everything in our world, we're the engines of what gets created. We are. It's not happening to us. It's happening through us. So that the more you understand about your inner power, the more clarity you bring to even the smallest choices in your life. Okay, that's this week's little message. Okay, thank you for listening.